They said Victor Halstead broke women the way men break horses, slowly, deliberately, until nothing remained but obedience. Elena Whitmore was about to become his next conquest. But on the morning she was meant to walk down the aisle in chains disguised as wedding vows, Elena did something no one expected. She ran. Through rain-slicked London streets in a wedding gown that felt like a shroud, she fled from a future of captivity, only to crash into the carriage of Adrian Vale, the Duke of Ravenshade, a man more dangerous than the monster she was escaping. What happened next would shake the foundations of London's elite forever. If you're watching from New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or anywhere else in the world, drop your city in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how this ends. The mirror showed Elena Whitmore a stranger. Ivory silk cascaded down her body like a waterfall of lies. Seed pearls dotted the bodice, each one representing a pound of her father's debt, she thought bitterly. The veil was French lace, delicate as spider's web and just as deadly. Her reflection looked like a bride from a fairy tale. But fairy tales didn't include the two armed guards standing outside her bedroom door. "Miss Whitmore?" Her lady's maid, Agnes, stood wringing her hands near the vanity. "It's nearly time. Your father is waiting in the carriage." My father. Elena's jaw tightened. The man who'd gambled away their estate, their name, their future, and finally, her. When the creditors came circling, Thomas Whitmore had made a deal with the devil himself, Victor Halstead. Even his name tasted like poison. "Agnes," Elena said quietly, "how much did my father receive for me?" The older woman's face went pale. "Miss, how much?" 15,000 pounds. Agnes's voice cracked, and forgiveness of all debts to the Halstead family interests. 15,000 pounds, her entire life, reduced to a transaction in a ledger. Elena had met Victor Halstead exactly 3 times. The first time, at a garden party 2 months ago, he'd circled her like a shark scenting blood in water. The second time, in her father's study, he'd outlined the terms of their arrangement, while her father stared at the floor like a coward. The third time, just last week, he'd leaned close enough that she could smell brandy and cruelty on his breath. "You'll learn quickly enough, my dear," he'd whispered. "I reward obedience, and I punish everything else." She'd seen the scars on his first wife's wrists before the woman died under mysterious circumstances. She'd heard the whispers about servants who vanished from Halstead House. She knew exactly what kind of man Victor was. And in less than an hour, she would become his legal property. The church bells of St. Margaret's began to toll in the distance. 9 o'clock. The wedding was scheduled for 10. "Miss?" Agnes held out the veil. "We really must." A crash from the street below made them both jump. Shouting erupted, followed by the screech of wheels and the panicked whinny of horses. Elena rushed to the window. A vendor's cart had overturned in the narrow street, spilling apples everywhere. 2 carriages had collided trying to avoid it. Drivers were cursing, pedestrians scrambling, and in the chaos the guards at Elena's door had moved to the stairwell, trying to see what was happening. For the first time in 2 months, there was no one watching her door. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Agnes. The maid's eyes went wide. "No," Agnes breathed. "Miss, you can't." "Tell them I needed a moment alone." Elena was already moving, gathering the ridiculous train of her dress. "Tell them I was praying. Tell them anything." "They'll catch you. Mr. Halstead has men everywhere." "Then I'll run faster." Elena didn't wait for a response. She slipped out of her room and down the servants' staircase, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. The back door that led to the mews was blessedly unguarded. Everyone had gone to see the commotion out front. Rain had begun to fall, cold October rain that immediately soaked through her veil. Elena yanked it off and threw it into a puddle. The street was chaos. Perfect. She ran. The wedding dress had looked beautiful in the mirror. In reality, it was a nightmare, layers of silk and petticoats that tangled around her legs with every step, threatening to trip her. The delicate slippers offered no traction on the wet cobblestones. Within half a block, Elena was gasping for breath, her carefully pinned hair coming loose. Behind her, someone shouted, "There! The bride! She's running!" No, 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 no. Elena risked a glance back. Two of Victor's men had spotted her, their distinctive black coats cutting through the crowd. They were gaining. She turned down an alley, praying it wasn't a dead end. Her lungs burned. The dress was impossibly heavy, waterlogged now, dragging at her like hands trying to pull her down. She could hear boots pounding behind her, getting closer. The alley opened onto a wider street near Piccadilly. Morning traffic clogged the road, carriages, vendors, pedestrians with umbrellas. Elena plunged into it without thinking, nearly getting trampled by a pair of horses. Someone cursed at her. She kept running, but the dress was too much. Her foot caught in the hem and she stumbled, barely catching herself against a lamppost. The guards were only yards away now. "Miss Whitmore!" One of them, a thick-necked brute named Crenshaw, reached for her. "Mr. Halstead is very disappointed." Elena jerked away and her hand found something, a loose cobblestone. Without thinking, she grabbed it and swung. It connected with Crenshaw's temple with a sickening crack. He went down hard. The second guard's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You little bitch!" A carriage pulled up beside them so suddenly that all three of them jumped. It was like nothing Elena had seen before, black lacquer polished to a mirror shine, with a coat of arms on the door that made the remaining guard go pale. Before Elena could process what was happening, the carriage door swung open. "Get in!" The voice was low, cultured, and absolutely commanding. Elena glimpsed a figure inside, a man in the shadows, barely visible. The guard reached for her again. "She's promised to Mr. Halstead." "I don't recall asking your opinion." The man's voice dropped several degrees colder. "The lady appears to be in distress. I'm offering assistance, unless you'd like to explain to the magistrate why you're accosting a woman in the street." Elena didn't hesitate. She grabbed her skirts and practically threw herself into the carriage. The door slammed shut behind her and they were moving, wheels clattering over cobblestones, putting distance between her and Victor's men with every second. For a moment, Elena just sat there, gasping for breath, her wet dress pooling around her feet. Then she looked up at her rescuer, and immediately understood why the guard had gone pale. The Duke of Ravenshade. She'd never seen him before. Men like Adrian Vale didn't attend garden parties or society functions, but she'd heard the stories. Everyone had. The war hero turned recluse, the Duke who'd killed 3 men in a duel, the scarred beast of Ravenshade Manor who hadn't been seen in London society for 5 years. In the dim interior of the carriage, she could see why. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, a pale line that pulled at the corner of his mouth. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, dark as winter nights, sharp enough to cut, studying her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "You're bleeding," he said. Elena looked down. She hadn't even noticed the scrapes on her palms from catching herself against the lamppost. Blood mixed with rainwater, dripping onto the immaculate floor of his carriage. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. Don't apologize." He handed her a handkerchief, fine linen monogrammed with a raven. "Halstead's men?" She nodded, pressing the cloth to her palms. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with her. "And the wedding dress suggests you were running from more than just his guards." Vale settled back against the seat, still watching her with those unsettling eyes. "Elena Whitmore, I presume. The bride who was supposed to become Mrs. Victor Halstead, approximately," he pulled out a pocket watch, 45 minutes from now. "How did you—" "London is smaller than you think, especially when it comes to men like Victor." Something dark flickered across his expression. "You're not the first woman to try to escape him, though I'll admit, you're the first to succeed this dramatically." Elena's stomach dropped. "The others?" "Found within hours. Returned to him, married him anyway." Vale's jaw tightened. "Victor is persistent in claiming what he believes belongs to him." "I don't belong to anyone." The words came out fiercer than Elena intended. "I won't go back. I'd rather die than—" "That can be arranged," Vale said mildly. At her expression, the corner of his mouth, the unscarred side, quirked slightly. "I'm joking, Miss Whitmore. Mostly. Though you should understand that running from Victor Halstead is considerably easier than hiding from him. He has resources, connections. By noon, every constable in London will be looking for you. Then I'll leave London." "With no money?" No family who won't turn you over immediately? In a wedding dress? He gestured to her soaked gown. Forgive me, but your plan seems incomplete. Elena wanted to argue, but he was right. She'd run on pure instinct, fueled by desperation and rage. She hadn't thought beyond escape, hadn't considered where she would go, how she would survive, what would happen when Victor inevitably found her. So what do you suggest? Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. That I just give up? Let him drag me back to whatever hell he has planned? No. Vale leaned forward, and for the first time, Elena saw something other than cool assessment in his expression, something almost like anger. I suggest you let me help you disappear in a way that Victor will never see coming. Why would you help me? Because 5 years ago I failed to help someone else. The words were quiet, but they carried weight that pressed against Elena's chest. Victor destroyed her, slowly, methodically, until there was nothing left. And I was too late to stop it. Elena thought of the whispers about Victor's first wife, the woman who'd allegedly thrown herself from a window, the one whose wrists had been scarred. What was her name? Elena asked softly. Catherine. Vale's expression shuddered. She was my ward's governess, a kind woman, gentle. Victor saw her at a dinner party and decided he wanted her. Within 3 months they were married. Within 6, she was dead. The carriage had stopped moving, Elena realized. They were somewhere outside the city now. She could see trees through the rain-streaked windows, a massive iron gate. Ravenshade Manor. I've spent the last 5 years building a case against him, Vale continued. Evidence of his crimes. Testimony from people he's destroyed. But Victor is careful. He keeps his brutality private, makes sure witnesses disappear. The magistrates either fear him or benefit from him. He paused. Your escape changes things. How? Because you're not just any woman fleeing an unwanted marriage. You're Victor Halstead's bride, missing on what should be his wedding day. The scandal alone will infuriate him. Vale's smile was cold and sharp. And an angry Victor makes mistakes. Elena's mind was racing. You want to use me as bait. I want to offer you a choice. Vale's voice softened slightly. Return to your father's house and Victor will have you married by nightfall. Run without help, and he'll find you within days. Or, he paused, stay here, under my protection. Let London believe you chose me instead of him. A scandal, Elena breathed. The scandal of the season. The Duke of Ravenshade stealing Victor Halstead's bride on her wedding day. Society will be apoplectic. He studied her carefully. It will also make Victor absolutely furious. Furious enough to come after both of us publicly. And when he does, we'll be ready to destroy him with every piece of evidence I've gathered. It was insane. Dangerous. A plan that could end with both of them ruined, or worse. But it was also the first time since her father had sold her that anyone had offered Elena a choice. If I agree, she said slowly, what do you get out of this? Besides revenge on a man you hate? Vale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Catherine begged me to help her. The night before she died, she sent me a letter. Asked me to get her away from him. And I was too careful, too concerned with proper channels and legal processes. I told her to wait, that I would handle it through official means. His hands clenched. They found her body the next morning. Elena saw it then, the guilt he carried, the rage that had been simmering for 5 years. This wasn't just about justice. It was about a debt he'd never been able to repay. You think saving me will somehow make up for her? Elena said quietly. No. Nothing will make up for Catherine. Vale met her eyes. But maybe I can stop Victor from doing to you what he did to her. Maybe that's enough. The carriage door opened. A butler stood there with an umbrella, rain drumming against the fabric. Beyond him, Ravenshade Manor loomed, all dark stone and Gothic spires, looking like something from a ghost story. Elena thought about her father, who'd sold her like livestock, about Victor, waiting at the church, expecting his purchased bride, about the life she'd been running toward before this morning, one of silent obedience and slow death. Then she thought about Catherine, who'd begged for help that came too late. I have conditions, Elena said. Vale raised an eyebrow. Oh? This is a partnership, not a rescue. I'm not trading one owner for another. Her voice was steady now. We work together, make decisions together. And when this is over, when Victor is destroyed, I walk away with enough money to start over, somewhere he'll never find me. For a moment, Vale just looked at her. Then slowly, he extended his hand. Partners, he agreed. Elena shook it. His grip was firm, calloused, a warrior's hand, not a gentleman's. Good. She stood, gathering the ruins of her wedding dress. Then let's make Victor Halstead wish he'd never heard my name. The butler's expression remained perfectly neutral as he escorted the drenched, bedraggled bride into the manor, but Elena caught the flash of approval in his eyes. Ravenshade Manor was everything London whispered it was, vast, dark, filled with shadows and secrets. But as Elena crossed the threshold, she didn't feel afraid. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. That same morning, Halstead House. Victor Halstead stood in front of the mirror in his dressing room, adjusting his cravat with meticulous precision, silk the color of fresh cream, diamond cufflinks that had belonged to his father, everything perfect for his wedding day. Behind him, his valet cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the carriage is ready. St. Margaret's is expecting. I know what they're expecting, Davis. Victor's voice was mild, pleasant even, but his reflection in the mirror showed eyes like chips of ice. My bride, my wedding, my future. He'd waited 2 months for this day. 2 months of watching Elena Whitmore pretend she had choices, pretend she was anything other than merchandise her father had put up for sale. She was beautiful, certainly, that pale skin, those defiant green eyes. But beauty wasn't what Victor wanted. Obedience was. And he would teach her, the way he'd taught Catherine, the way he'd taught all of them. By the time their first anniversary arrived, Elena Whitmore would kneel when he entered a room, would flinch at his footsteps, would understand that her only purpose was to serve his needs and bear his name. The thought made him smile. Sir? Davis held out his coat. It's nearly time. The door burst open. Crenshaw stumbled in, blood streaming from his temple, his coat torn. Victor went very still. What happened to you? The girl, Crenshaw gasped. She ran. We tried to stop her, but she hit me with a rock and jumped into a carriage. It was... Whose carriage? Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. The Duke of Ravenshade, sir. The man with the scar. He took her. For a moment, Victor didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, very carefully, he set down his cravat pin. Adrian Vale. The name came out soft as silk. He dares to interfere with my wedding? Sir, we tried to stop her. You failed. Victor turned. Crenshaw flinched. But that's all right. Elena is spirited. I expected she might try something foolish. That's why you're going to go to Ravenshade Manor, explain to the Duke that there's been a misunderstanding, and retrieve my bride. And if he refuses? Victor smiled. It was the smile he wore when teaching lessons. Then remind him that even dukes can have accidents, that even ancient estates can burn, that I have connections in every corner of London, and Adrian Vale has been isolated in his manor for 5 years. He picked up his gloves. But tell him politely first. After all, we're civilized men. Crenshaw nodded and fled. Victor looked at himself in the mirror again. The wedding would be delayed, certainly. Embarrassing, but manageable. He'd claim Elena had taken ill, that she'd needed a day to compose herself. London society would whisper, but they always whispered. And when he had her back, and he would get her back, he would make very certain she understood what running from Victor Halstead cost. Ravenshade Manor, midday. Elena stood in a bedroom 3 times the size of the one she'd fled from, wearing a borrowed dress that actually fit and staring out the window at the grounds of Ravenshade Manor. The rain had stopped. Everything looked green and wild, untamed in a way London never was. A knock at the door made her turn. Adrian Vale entered carrying a tea tray himself, no servant in sight. He'd changed from his traveling clothes into simpler attire. Dark trousers, white shirt, no cravat. The scar seemed less prominent somehow, just a part of his face rather than a defining feature. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray on a small table. "Mrs. Henshaw says you haven't eaten since yesterday." Elena realized he was right. Her stomach was hollow with hunger. She'd been too nervous yesterday to eat, too desperate this morning. Now her hands shook as she reached for a scone. "Thank you," she managed. Vale poured tea with surprising grace. "I should warn you, Victor sent men 2 hours ago. They're at the gate demanding I return his stolen bride." Elena's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "What did you tell them?" "That you're under my protection and they can go to hell." He handed her the teacup. More diplomatically phrased, of course, but the sentiment was clear. "He won't stop." "I'm counting on it." Vale settled into the chair across from her. "By tomorrow, all of London will know the Duke of Ravenshade has claimed Victor Halstead's bride. The speculation will be vicious. Society will be scandalized." He paused. "Are you prepared for that?" Elena thought about it. About being the subject of gossip, whispers, judgment, about her reputation being shredded. Then she thought about being Victor's wife. "Let them talk," she said firmly. Something like approval flickered in Vale's expression. "Good, because this is where it gets complicated." He pulled out a folder, thick with documents. 5 years of evidence against Victor. Testimony from servants he abused, financial records showing bribes to magistrates, proof that he's been trafficking in... He stopped. "It's extensive, but none of it matters if we can't force him into the open." "How do we do that?" "By making this personal." Vale spread the documents on the table. "Victor sees people as possessions. You were his possession, legally purchased through your father's debt. When I took you, I stole from him. That's an insult he can't ignore." Elena felt cold. "So you want him to come after us?" "I want him to be so angry, so desperate to reclaim what he thinks is his, that he makes a public mistake, attacks us where witnesses can see. Reveals the monster beneath the gentleman's facade." Vale's jaw tightened. "And then we bury him with evidence." It was ruthless, dangerous, using her escape as kindling to light a fire that would consume Victor Halstead. "When?" Elena asked. "The Royal Masquerade, 3 weeks from now. All of London society will be there, including Victor." Vale's smile was cold. "We'll attend as the Duke and Duchess of Ravenshade. Make our first public appearance together. Let everyone see that you chose me over him." "He'll be furious." "He'll be desperate, and desperate men make fatal errors." Vale began gathering the documents. "But you need to understand, once we do this, there's no going back. Victor will come after us with everything he has. It will be war." Elena thought about Catherine, about the other women who'd tried to escape and failed, about every person Victor had crushed beneath his expensive boots. "Good," she said quietly. "I'm tired of running. Let's fight." Vale looked at her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand again. "Partners," he said. Elena shook it. "Partners." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting Ravenshade Manor in gold. The war was beginning. The first 3 days at Ravenshade Manor passed like a fever dream. Elena woke each morning in silk sheets that didn't smell like fear, ate meals she actually tasted, and walked through rooms where no one watched her with predatory eyes. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like the calm before a hurricane. On the 4th morning, Vale summoned her to his study. The room was exactly what Elena expected from a war strategist. Maps on the walls, documents organized with military precision, a massive desk scarred with what looked like knife marks. Vale stood by the window, backlit by weak autumn sun, reading a letter that made his jaw tight. "Victor's moving faster than anticipated," he said without preamble. "He's filed a formal complaint with the magistrate. Claims I abducted you, coerced you. He's demanding your immediate return and threatening legal action." Elena's stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" "He can try. The law is complicated when it comes to women and marriage contracts." Vale tossed the letter onto his desk. "Your father signed documents. Victor paid money. In the eyes of most magistrates, your property that was stolen before the transaction completed." The word property hit Elena like a slap. So what do we do? We accelerate the plan. Vale turned to face her fully. I was going to give you time to prepare, to learn how to move in society as a duchess. But Victor's forcing our hand. The Ashford Ball is in 5 days, smaller than the Royal Masquerade, but still significant. Half of London's elite will be there. You want us to make our debut there? I want to declare war there. Vale's expression was hard. We attend together. Let society see you chose me over him. Make it so public, so undeniable, that Victor can't claim you were coerced. He'll have to respond. Elena thought about facing all those people. The whispers, the judgment, the scandal. Then she thought about the alternative. Teach me, she said. Vale raised an eyebrow. Teach you what? How to be the Duchess of Ravenshade. Elena straightened her spine. If we're going to convince London society that I chose you, I need to look like I belong at your side, not like a runaway bride you took pity on. Something flickered in Vale's expression, surprise, maybe, or respect. That's not a small request. You'd need to learn everything in less than a week. How to move, speak, carry yourself as nobility. Most women train for this their entire lives. Then I'll learn faster. Elena met his eyes. You said this was a partnership. Partners don't show up unprepared. Vale studied her for a long moment. Then he crossed to his desk and pulled a cord. A bell chimed somewhere deep in the manor. Mrs. Henshaw will outfit you properly. New wardrobe, appropriate for a duchess. He began sorting through papers. And I'll handle the rest of your education personally. You? I need to know you can hold your own against society's sharks. That means I need to see your weaknesses firsthand. Vale's smile was sharp. Consider it a trial by fire. The study door opened. A woman entered, tall, iron-haired, with the bearing of a general inspecting troops. Mrs. Henshaw, Elena presumed, the housekeeper who ran Ravenshade Manor like a fortress. Your Grace? Mrs. Henshaw's voice could have cut glass. Miss Whitmore needs to become a duchess in 5 days, Vale said. Make it happen. Mrs. Henshaw's gaze swept over Elena, cataloging every flaw with ruthless efficiency. Then, impossibly, she smiled. Finally, she said, a challenge. The education began immediately. Mrs. Henshaw attacked Elena's wardrobe first, declaring everything utterly unsuitable for a woman of standing. Within hours, seamstresses descended on Ravenshade Manor like an invading army, measuring, pinning, draping fabric in shades Elena had never worn, deep emeralds, midnight blues, silver like moonlight. Duchesses don't fade into wallpaper, Mrs. Henshaw announced, dismissing a pale pink option. They command attention. But clothes were the easy part. Vale's lessons were something else entirely. That first afternoon, he led Elena to the ballroom, a vast space that echoed with their footsteps. Musicians sat in the corner, instruments ready. Dancing first, Vale said. Every eye will be on us at the Ashford Ball. One misstep and society will assume I dragged you there against your will. Elena had learned basic country dances, of course. Every young woman did. But this was different. Vale moved like water, each step precise and controlled. He positioned Elena's hand on his shoulder, his own hand settling at her waist with impersonal efficiency. The waltz is a conversation, he said as the music began. I lead. You follow. But it should look effortless, like we've danced together 1,000 times. They hadn't danced together once. Elena stumbled within the first 8 counts, stepping on his foot. Vale didn't flinch. Again. They repeated the sequence. Elena stumbled again. Your weight is wrong. You're thinking too much. Feel the music instead. I'm trying. Try harder. Vale's voice was flat. Victor will be watching for any sign of hesitation between us, any hint that this is an arrangement rather than a choice. If you can't even dance with me convincingly, he'll tear us apart in minutes. The criticism stung, but Elena forced herself to focus, to feel the rhythm instead of counting it, to trust that Vale would catch her if she fell. By the 10th repetition, something clicked. Her body found the pattern. The ballroom began to spin, and she was spinning with it, moving in Vale's arms like she belonged there. Better, Vale said. His hand tightened fractionally at her waist. Again. They danced until Elena's feet ached. Then Vale moved on to conversation. Society operates on subtext, he explained, leading her to the drawing room. What you say matters less than how you say it. Every word is a weapon or a shield. You need to learn which is which. He sat across from her, assuming the role of a society matron. My dear Duchess, he said in a falsetto that would have been funny if his expression wasn't so serious. How unexpected to see you here. We'd all heard such interesting rumors about your wedding day. Elena froze. How was she supposed to respond to that? Remember, Vale said in his normal voice, they want to see you flustered. Don't give them the satisfaction. Acknowledge the elephant in the room, but on your terms. He repeated the question. Elena took a breath. Yes, I imagine the rumors have been quite creative, she said carefully, though I've found reality far more satisfying than whatever fiction London is currently inventing. Vale's mouth quirked. Not bad, but too defensive. Try again. This time, make them uncomfortable for asking. They practiced for hours. Vale threw every possible scenario at her, cutting remarks, innocent-sounding questions with vicious subtext, direct challenges to her presence at his side. He was relentless, never letting her rest, pushing until her responses became instinct rather than calculation. By evening, Elena's head throbbed and her voice was hoarse, but she'd learned to parry questions like sword strikes, to smile while delivering insults wrapped in silk. You're a quick study, Vale said as they finally broke for dinner. Most debutantes take years to develop that kind of verbal armor. Most debutantes weren't sold to monsters, Elena replied. Vale's expression shuddered. No, most weren't. Dinner was a quiet affair. They ate in the small dining room rather than the formal one, just the two of them at opposite ends of a table that could have seated 12. The silence should have been awkward. Instead, it felt almost companionable. Tell me about Catherine, Elena said suddenly. Vale's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Why? Because I'm fighting her war too, and I should know who I'm fighting for. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he set down his fork and leaned back. Catherine was my ward's governess. Sarah, my ward, was 8 when her parents died and left her in my care. I was barely 25, just back from the war, had no idea how to raise a child. His voice was distant. Catherine made it easy. She was patient, kind, everything Sarah needed, everything I wasn't. You cared about her. Not romantically, but yes, she became part of our household, part of our family. Vale's jaw tightened. Victor saw her at a dinner party I hosted, decided he wanted her. He courted her with the precision of a military campaign, flowers, poetry, promises. Catherine was flattered. She was a governess, after all, not someone who usually attracted aristocratic attention. Elena felt sick. She didn't know what he was. None of them ever do, not until it's too late. Vale's hands clenched. By the time she realized her mistake, they were already married, and Victor made sure she understood that marriage was a cage she'd never escape. She sent you a letter. The night before she died, begged me to help her leave him, said she couldn't survive another month in that house. Vale's voice went flat. I told her I would handle it legally, through proper channels. I didn't want to cause a scandal that would hurt Sarah or damage her reputation. I thought I had time. And the next morning, they found her at the bottom of the stairs. Victor claimed she fell. The doctor ruled it an accident. Vale met Elena's eyes. But I saw the bruises on her wrists, finger-shaped. She didn't fall. She jumped, because jumping was better than staying. The weight of that settled between them like a stone. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. Don't be sorry. Be ready. Vale stood. Because when we face Victor at the Ashford ball, he'll try to do to you what he did to Catherine. And this time, I won't be too late. The next 4 days blurred together in a haze of preparation. Mrs. Henshaw drilled Elena on titles, precedents, and the intricate hierarchy of London society. Lady Ashford takes precedence over Lady Melbourne because her husband's title is older, even though Melbourne has more money. You must know these things instinctively. The dancing master, a severe Frenchman named Monsieur Beaumont, made them repeat sequences until Elena's muscles screamed. The Duke of Ravenshade does not dance with amateurs. Again! And Vale pushed her hardest of all. A duchess must be able to manage a household of 50 servants, he said, leading her through Ravenshade's vast kitchen where Cook ruled like a tyrant. Know every name, every role, every problem before it becomes a crisis. A duchess must understand finance. He spread ledgers across the library table. How much it costs to run an estate, where money comes from, and where it goes. Victor will try to claim you're a burden. Prove him wrong by knowing these numbers better than he does. A duchess must never show fear. He brought her to the portrait gallery, where generations of Vale ancestors stared down with cold eyes. These people faced wars, plagues, political upheaval. You're facing one petty aristocrat with delusions of power. Channel their strength. But it was the evening before the ball that everything changed. Elena stood in front of her mirror, wearing the gown Mrs. Henshaw had commissioned for the event. It was the color of midnight, silk that caught the light like water, with silver embroidery that traced patterns across her shoulders like frost. She looked like someone else, someone dangerous. A knock at the door. Vale entered carrying a wooden box. There's one more lesson, he said, the most important one. He opened the box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a dagger. Elena stared at it. The blade was perhaps 6 inches long, wickedly sharp, with a handle of worked silver, beautiful and deadly. Tomorrow night you'll be in a ballroom full of people who want to see you fail, Vale said quietly. Most will use words as weapons, but Victor is unpredictable, and I need to know you can protect yourself if I'm not beside you. He lifted the dagger, showing her how to hold it. It straps to your thigh, hidden beneath your skirts. No one will know it's there unless you need it. You think he'll attack me publicly? I think Victor believes you're his property, and I think he'll do whatever it takes to reclaim you. Vale's expression was grim. This is your last resort. But if he corners you, if his men try to take you, don't hesitate. Fight. Elena took the dagger. It was heavier than she expected, solid and real in her hand. Show me how to use it, she said. Vale taught her in the ballroom, the same space where they'd practiced waltzes. But this dance was different, brutal, efficient, designed to survive rather than impress. Don't slash, thrust. He guided her arm through the motion. Aim for soft tissue, throat, stomach, inner thigh, anywhere that bleeds fast. What if I freeze? Then you die. Vale's voice was harsh. Or worse, you end up back in Victor's house. Is that what you want? Elena thought about Catherine throwing herself from a window, about Victor's cold eyes at her father's study, about becoming property. No, she said. Then don't freeze, survive. They practiced until Elena's arm ached, until the movements became muscle memory. Thrust, retreat, guard. Again and again. Finally, Vale stepped back. You're ready. Elena wasn't sure if he meant for the ball or for battle. Maybe they were the same thing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, watching the grounds of Ravenshade Manor painted silver by moonlight, and thought about the woman she'd been 4 days ago, that Elena had run in terror, desperate and powerless. This Elena carried a knife and knew how to use it. Tomorrow would either prove her transformation was real or destroy her completely. The morning of the Ashford ball arrived cold and gray. Elena dressed with Mrs. Henshaw's help, every layer of silk and steel a kind of armor. The dagger strapped to her thigh felt like a secret promise. When she descended the stairs, Vale was waiting in the entrance hall. He'd dressed formally, black coat, silver waistcoat, cravat tied with precision. But it was the way he looked at her that made Elena's breath catch. Not with desire or possession, but with something that might have been pride. You look like a duchess, he said simply. I feel like I'm going to war. Same thing, Vale offered his arm. Ready? Elena thought about everything she'd learned, every dance step, every cutting remark, every way to survive in a world designed to destroy her. She thought about Catherine, who hadn't gotten the chance to fight back. Ready, she said. The carriage ride to Ashford House took an hour. Neither of them spoke. Vale reviewed documents. Final pieces of evidence against Victor, organized and indexed. Elena practiced her breathing, the way Monsieur Beaumont had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Calm despite the storm. When they arrived, London society was already in full predatory mode. Ashford House blazed with light, every window golden against the dusk. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging aristocrats in silk and jewels. Elena could feel eyes tracking them as their carriage pulled up to the entrance. The whispers started before they even descended. "Is that the Duke of Ravenshade? My word, he actually came. And who is that with him?" Vale helped Elena down with practiced ease, his hand firm on hers. Then he did something unexpected. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm and held it there, a gesture of unmistakable possession and protection. "They're going to eat us alive," Elena murmured. "Let them try," Vale replied. They walked up the steps together. The crowd parted like water, everyone staring, no one bothering to hide their shock. The Duke of Ravenshade hadn't attended a society function in 5 years, and now he arrived with a mysterious woman on his arm, looking like he owned the world. Lord Ashford met them at the door, a portly man with nervous eyes. "Your Grace," he stammered, "we're honored by your presence. Though I must admit we weren't expecting my Duchess," Vale finished smoothly. "Elena, may I present Lord Ashford? Ashford, the Duchess of Ravenshade." The lie was so casual, so confident, that Lord Ashford accepted it without question. He bowed to Elena. "Duchess, a pleasure." Elena smiled the way Mrs. Henshaw had taught her, warm but untouchable. "Lord Ashford, thank you for your hospitality." They moved into the ballroom and the whispers exploded. Elena had never seen anything like it. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across marble floors. Musicians played from a raised platform. Women in gowns worth more than Elena's family estate clustered in groups, fans fluttering like bird wings as they gossiped. Men in evening dress held glasses of champagne and discussed politics with the casual arrogance of people who believed they controlled the world. And every single one of them was staring at Elena and Vale. "Steady," Vale murmured. "Remember, you chose this. Act like it." A woman approached, tall, elegant, with predatory eyes. Lady Melbourne, Elena remembered from her lessons. Influential, dangerous. "Adrian," Lady Melbourne purred. "What a surprise! We'd all quite given up on seeing you in society again. And with a companion, no less." Her gaze raked over Elena. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "The Duchess of Ravenshade," Vale said. "My wife." The word wife detonated like a bomb. Shocked gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Lady Melbourne's eyes went wide. "Wife?" she repeated. "But I heard, that is, wasn't there talk of Miss Whitmore being engaged to—" "Victor Halstead," Elena said clearly. "Yes, I ended that arrangement." "Ended it?" Lady Melbourne's smile sharpened. "My dear, one doesn't simply end an engagement to a man like Victor Halstead." "I did." Elena met her eyes. "I chose Adrian instead. Is that so difficult to believe?" The challenge hung in the air. Lady Melbourne studied Elena like a general assessing an enemy's defenses. "Not difficult," she said slowly. "Merely unexpected. One hears such stories about the Duke of Ravenshade. The isolation, the temper, the scar." She let the word hang deliberately. Elena felt Vale tense beside her. This was the test. Would she defend him or distance herself? "The scar," Elena said calmly, "was earned fighting for England while men like Victor bought their way out of service. I find it rather distinguished." Lady Melbourne blinked. Then, impossibly, she laughed. "Well, you certainly chose a bold one, Adrian." She raised her champagne glass. "Welcome to London society, Duchess. I suspect you'll make things considerably more interesting." She drifted away. Other vultures descended immediately. For the next hour, Elena and Vale worked the room like soldiers on a battlefield. Every conversation was a skirmish. Every smile a calculated strike. Elena deployed everything she'd learned, deflecting insults, commanding attention, making it clear she wasn't a victim, but a woman who'd chosen her own fate. Vale stayed close, a silent presence at her shoulder, but he let her fight her own battles, only intervening when someone pushed too hard. And slowly, impossibly, Elena felt the room shift. The whispers changed from scandalized to intrigued. Women began watching her with grudging respect. Men started treating Vale with the wariness they showed to apex predators. They were winning. Then Victor Halstead walked into the ballroom. Elena felt him before she saw him, a cold pressure that made her skin prickle. She turned. He stood in the entrance, dressed in silver and white like a prince from a nightmare. His eyes swept the room until they found her, and locked on. The ballroom went silent. Everyone could feel the tension crackling between them like lightning about to strike. Victor began walking toward them. The crowd parted, no one wanting to be caught in whatever was about to happen. Vale's hand found Elena's. Squeezed once. "Stand your ground." Victor stopped 3 feet away. Up close, Elena could see the rage simmering beneath his civilized mask, but his voice, when he spoke, was smooth as silk. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "how relieved I am to see you safe. When you disappeared on our wedding day, I feared the worst." "I wasn't lost, Victor," Elena replied. "I left." "Under duress, surely. No rational woman would abandon her family's salvation over mere nerves." His smile was poison. "But you're here now. We can still salvage this. The magistrate has been very understanding about the delay." "There is no delay," Elena interrupted. "There is no wedding. I chose someone else." Victor's eyes flicked to Vale, then back to Elena. "You expect me to believe you developed feelings for the Duke of Ravenshade in the span of a week?" "I expect you to believe I'd rather face anything than marry you." The insult landed like a slap. Victor's mask cracked for just a second, revealing the monster underneath before smoothing back into place. "Adrian," Victor said, his voice deadly calm, "surely you understand this is a misunderstanding. Miss Whitmore was confused, frightened. You took advantage—" "Careful," Vale said quietly. "You're about to accuse a peer of the realm of kidnapping in front of half of London. Are you certain you want to proceed?" Victor's jaw worked. Around them, the crowd watched with predatory interest. This was the scandal of the decade unfolding in real time. "Elena was promised to me," Victor said. "Contracts were signed, money exchanged. In the eyes of the law—" "The law recognizes my marriage to the Duchess," Vale interrupted. "Whatever arrangements you made with her father are void." It was a bluff. They weren't actually married, but Victor couldn't prove it without causing an even bigger scandal. Victor looked at Elena. "Is this truly what you want? To throw away your family's future for a monster who hides in his manor because society rejects him?" "Better a monster who respects me than a gentleman who'd break me," Elena said. Something dangerous flashed in Victor's eyes. "You think you know him? You think this fairy tale will last? Adrian Vale destroys everything he touches. Ask Catherine." Vale went very still. Elena felt murder radiating off him like heat. "Catherine," Vale said softly, "is why you're going to lose everything." Victor smiled. "Bold words from a man with no power and no friends. You've been isolated for 5 years, Adrian. I, on the other hand, have connections in every corner of London. Magistrates who owe me favors, constables on my payroll, men who understand that order must be maintained." He looked at Elena. "Did you really think stealing my bride would end well for you?" "I thought," Elena said clearly, "that someone should finally stop you." The ballroom erupted in whispers. Victor's mask finally shattered completely. Rage twisted his features into something inhuman. "You'll regret this," he hissed at Elena. "Both of you. I'll destroy your reputation, your estates, everything you have. And when I'm done, Elena, you'll beg to come back to me." "Never," Elena said. Victor lunged forward, and Vale stepped between them, his hand going to Elena's waist in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "Touch her," Vale said quietly, "and I'll kill you where you stand." The promise in his voice was absolute. Victor froze. For a moment the ballroom held its breath. Then Lord Ashford appeared with several guards, nervous and sweating. "Gentlemen, please, this is a civilized gathering." "Of course," Victor said, smoothing his coat. His eyes never left Elena's face. Forgive me, Lord Ashford. I'm afraid I became emotional. It's not every day one's bride is stolen by a scarred hermit. The insult was deliberate, testing whether Vale would lose control. But Elena spoke first. This scarred hermit, she said clearly, showed me more respect in a week than you did in 2 months. That's why I chose him. The crowd gasped. Several women actually applauded. Victor's face went white with fury. But there was nothing he could do. Not here, not publicly, not without confirming everything Elena had just implied about his character. He turned and walked out of the ballroom, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Elena stood there, heart pounding, hands still clasped in veils. She'd just declared war in front of London society. There was no going back now. Vale squeezed her hand gently. Well done, he murmured. But we need to leave. Now. Why, because Victor just lost in public, which means he'll try to win in private. They made their excuses to Lord Ashford and headed for their carriage. But as they stepped into the cool night air, Elena saw shadows moving near the horses. Men. Victor's men. Vale saw them too. His hand went to his coat, a pistol hidden there, Elena realized. Stay behind me, he ordered. But Elena remembered her lessons, the dagger strapped to her thigh, the promise she'd made to survive. She stepped forward instead beside Vale rather than behind him. Together, she said. And as Victor's men emerged from the shadows, Elena Whitmore, the runaway bride who'd become a duchess in a week, prepared to prove that she'd learned how to fight. Victor's men moved like wolves closing in on wounded prey, 4 of them, spreading out to cut off escape routes. The lead one was Crenshaw, the brute Elena had hit with a cobblestone on her wedding day. The bruise still shadowed his temple, and his smile promised payback. Your Grace, Crenshaw said, his voice dripping mock respect. Mr. Halstead requests the pleasure of Miss Whitmore's company, just for a moment, to discuss their unfinished business. Vale's hand stayed inside his coat, gripping the pistol Elena knew was there. The Duchess of Ravenshade doesn't take requests from Victor's lapdogs. Duchess? Crenshaw laughed, and the other men joined in. That's rich. Everyone knows there's been no wedding, just a scarred hermit playing pretend with another man's property. Elena felt the dagger's weight against her thigh. Around them, the street was dark. Lord Ashford's guests were still inside, and the drivers had mysteriously vanished from the carriage line. Victor had planned this carefully. Last chance, Vale said quietly. Walk away. Mr. Halstead says the girl comes with us. What happens after that depends on how much she's learned to cooperate. Crenshaw took a step forward. Easy way or hard way, Your Grace. But she's coming. The other 3 men shifted, hands moving to weapons hidden in their coats. They expected Vale to back down. After all, he'd been a recluse for 5 years, soft, broken. They were catastrophically wrong. Vale moved like lightning. The pistol appeared in his hand, aimed at Crenshaw's head before anyone could blink. I spent 3 years in the war learning how to kill men faster than you can think. The scar came from a French bayonet. I took it from him after I broke his neck with my bare hands. His voice was ice and death. So when I tell you to walk away, understand that I'm being merciful. Crenshaw froze. But one of the other men, younger, stupider, reached for Elena. She didn't think. She just moved. Her hand found the dagger through her skirts, yanked it free, and slashed in one fluid motion. The blade caught the man's reaching hand, opening a red line across his knuckles. He screamed and stumbled back. Elena leveled the dagger at the others, her heart hammering but her hand steady. The Duke said, walk away. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. You taught her to use a knife? That's adorable. He whistled sharply. More men emerged from the shadows. 6, 8, too many. Get in the carriage, Vale ordered Elena. Now. Not without you. I said now. But Elena had spent a week learning to be a duchess, not a coward. She positioned herself back to back with Vale, dagger ready. Together. Remember? Vale's jaw tightened, but there wasn't time to argue. The men were closing in, a tightening circle of violence. Crenshaw pulled a club from his coat. Others drew knives, brass knuckles, weapons designed to hurt rather than kill quickly. Victor wanted Elena alive. Everyone else was expendable. "You should have stayed in your manor, Your Grace," Crenshaw said. "Should have let Mr. Halstead have what belongs to him. Now we've got to do this the ugly way." The first man lunged at Vale. The pistol fired, deafening in the enclosed street, and the man went down. But there were too many. They rushed forward in a coordinated attack, and suddenly everything was chaos. Vale became a whirlwind of controlled violence. He used the pistol like a club after the single shot, cracking skulls, breaking noses. His movements were economical, brutal, each strike designed to disable. This was the war hero London had forgotten existed, the man who'd survived hell and came back harder. Elena fought with desperate efficiency. A man grabbed for her arm. She drove the dagger toward his throat. He jerked back, and her blade caught his shoulder instead. Not fatal, but he howled and released her. Another came from the side. She slashed wildly, felt the blade connect, heard cursing, but they were being overwhelmed. For every man Vale dropped, two more appeared. Elena felt hands grab her dress, tearing fabric. She spun, cutting blindly, trying to break free. Then something crashed into her from behind. She went down hard, the dagger skittering across cobblestones. Heavy weight pinned her down. Crenshaw's face filled her vision, blood streaming from his broken nose. "Feisty," he grunted. "Mr. Halstead will enjoy breaking that spirit." Elena screamed and fought, but he was too strong. His hands closed around her wrists, grinding them into the stone. She saw Vale trying to reach her, surrounded by four men, taking hits even as he dealt them out. This was it. They were going to lose. Victor would drag her back to whatever nightmare he'd planned, and Vale... A carriage thundered around the corner, horses wild-eyed and frothing, but it wasn't Victor's. The door bore a crest Elena didn't recognize, 3 ravens over a silver shield. The carriage didn't slow. It smashed into the cluster of men surrounding Vale, sending bodies flying like bowling pins. The driver, a massive man in livery, leaped down with a cudgel and immediately started cracking skulls with professional efficiency. Crenshaw looked up, distracted. Elena drove her knee into his groin with everything she had. He made a sound like a dying animal and rolled off her. She scrambled for the dagger, found it, came up ready to fight. But the tide had turned. The new driver was a one-man army, and with the pressure off Vale, he became lethal. Within seconds, Victor's men were fleeing or unconscious, leaving only Crenshaw groaning on the ground. Vale appeared at Elena's side, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles. "Are you hurt?" "No. Who?" "Adrian," a woman's voice called from the mysterious carriage. "Always attracting trouble, I see." The speaker emerged, tall, elegant, maybe 40, with Vale's same dark eyes and a smile sharp as broken glass. She surveyed the carnage with the casual interest of someone reviewing a mildly entertaining play. "Eleanor," Vale said, "what are you doing here?" "Saving your stubborn hide, apparently." The woman, Eleanor, turned to Elena. "You must be the infamous runaway bride. I'm Eleanor Thorne, Adrian's older sister, and you, darling, just started a war." Elena was still catching her breath, adrenaline making her shake. "We didn't start anything. Victor Halstead is telling everyone you were kidnapped, that Adrian coerced you using your father's debts, that you're being held against your will at Ravenshade Manor." Eleanor's expression hardened. Half of London society is ready to believe him. The other half is waiting to see which way the scandal falls. "He's lying," Elena said. "Of course he is. But lies told convincingly enough become truth." Eleanor gestured to her driver, who was efficiently tying up the conscious attackers. "Margaret will handle these gentlemen. We need to get you both somewhere secure before Victor's next move." Vale wiped blood from his lip. "The manor is secure." "The manor is isolated, which makes it a trap." Eleanor fixed him with a look that probably worked when they were children. "Victor just tried to abduct Elena in the middle of Mayfair. He's past subtlety. What do you think he'll do when you're tucked away in the countryside with no witnesses?" "Then what do you suggest?" "My townhouse, central London, servants loyal to me, not bought by Victor's money, and more importantly," Eleanor's smile turned predatory, "I have something you need. Proof that will destroy Victor so completely he'll wish you just killed him tonight." Vale went still. "What kind of proof?" The kind I've been gathering for 3 years, ever since Victor tried to buy my husband's vote in Parliament. Eleanor's voice went cold. Did you really think you were the only one hunting him, little brother? The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Elena looked between them, Vale's shocked expression, Eleanor's grim satisfaction. You never said anything, Vale said. You shut yourself away in Ravenshade and refused to see family. What was I supposed to do, send a letter? Eleanor gestured to her carriage. We can discuss my investigative methods later. Right now we need to move before the magistrate arrives. Or worse, before Victor comes back with an army. She was right. Already Elena could hear whistles in the distance, constables responding to the gunshot. And who knew how many more men Victor had waiting in the shadows? They piled into Eleanor's carriage, Margaret the driver taking the reins again, and fled into the London night. Eleanor's townhouse was a fortress disguised as elegance. 4 stories of white stone in Belgrave Square, with servants who watched the streets like soldiers on patrol. They were ushered inside through a service entrance, away from curious eyes. Inside, Eleanor's husband, Lord Thomas Thorne, waited in the study. He was a quiet man with kind eyes and the bearing of someone used to political warfare. He took one look at Elena's torn dress and Vale's bloody knuckles and poured brandy without asking. Victor's men? He asked. 8 of them, Vale confirmed. Maybe more waiting in reserve. Thomas handed him the glass. He's getting desperate. That's good for us. Good? Elena accepted her own brandy, though her hands still shook. How is any of this good? Because desperate men make mistakes. Eleanor swept into the study, having changed into a practical day dress. And Victor just made a catastrophic one by attacking you publicly. Margaret has 3 witnesses who saw the assault. By morning, their statements will be filed with the magistrate. Victor owns half the magistrates, Vale said darkly. But not all of them, and not the ones I've been cultivating. Eleanor pulled out a thick folder, similar to the ones Vale kept at Ravenshade. For 3 years I've been documenting Victor's activities, his bribes, his intimidation, the women he's destroyed. She spread documents across Thomas's desk. Elena saw names, dates, meticulous records of cruelty. Margaret worked in Victor's household before I hired her away, Eleanor continued. She saw what he did to Catherine, what he did to others, and she's willing to testify. Vale stared at his sister. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have stormed Victor's house and gotten yourself killed. Eleanor's voice softened. You were drowning in grief and rage, Adrian. I needed you to survive long enough to actually fight him properly. The siblings looked at each other, years of unspoken pain and protection passing between them. Then Vale nodded slowly. So we combine our evidence, he said. Create a case so overwhelming that even Victor's bought magistrates can't ignore it. Exactly, but there's a problem. Thomas cleared his throat. The evidence we have is extensive, but it's also circumstantial. Testimony from servants. Financial records that could be explained away. What we need is something undeniable, something that proves Victor is still committing crimes, not just that he committed them in the past. Like what? Elena asked. Eleanor and Thomas exchanged a look. Then Eleanor turned to Elena. Like catching him in the act of trafficking, she said quietly. Victor doesn't just destroy women through marriage. He runs a procurement operation for wealthy men who share his appetites. Young women who disappear from the streets. Orphans no one will miss. He provides them to aristocrats who pay handsomely for discretion. Elena felt sick. How do you know this? Because one of those women escaped. She came to me 6 months ago, half dead and terrified. I've been protecting her while gathering evidence. Eleanor's jaw tightened. But testimony from a traumatized girl won't convince London's elite. We need to catch Victor making a transaction, document it, force the authorities to act. That's insane, Vale said flatly. You're talking about infiltrating an illegal operation run by one of the most dangerous men in London. I'm talking about ending him. Eleanor met her brother's eyes. Completely, permanently, so he can never hurt anyone again. The weight of it settled over the room. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping a monster who'd been operating in plain sight for years. Elena thought about all the women Victor had destroyed, Catherine throwing herself from a window, the servants who'd vanished, the girl who'd barely escaped. And she thought about what would happen if they failed, if Victor won and dragged her back to become his next victim. How would it work? She asked. Eleanor looked surprised. You can't seriously be considering— I am. Elena set down her brandy glass with a sharp click. Victor wants me. Let's use that. Absolutely not, Vale said immediately. We're not dangling you as bait. We already are. That's what the whole Duchess charade is about, making Victor so angry he attacks us publicly. Elena turned to face him. The difference is, this time we control the situation. We choose the location, set the trap. And if something goes wrong? Vale's voice was hard. If Victor gets his hands on you before we can stop him? Elena touched the spot where the dagger had been strapped to her thigh. Then I fight, like you taught me. This is different from a street brawl. Adrian, Eleanor interrupted. She's right. Victor won't be able to resist if we offer him a chance to reclaim what he thinks is his, and we'll be ready. Vale looked like he wanted to argue more, but he'd also seen Elena fight tonight, seen her stand her ground when lesser women would have crumbled. Tell me the plan, he said finally. All of it. Eleanor pulled out more documents. There's an auction in 3 days. Private. Very exclusive. Victor provides merchandise to buyers. Women he's procured through various means. The location changes, but I have a contact who can get us the details. You want to raid it? Thomas asked. I want to attend it, as buyers. Eleanor's smile was razor sharp. Victor won't be able to resist showing off his operation to potential clients, especially wealthy ones, and while he's busy bragging, we document everything. Then we bring in the magistrates we trust. What about Elena? Vale asked. She stays here, hidden, safe. Eleanor looked at Elena. Unless you have a better idea? Elena did. It was reckless and terrifying, but it was also the only thing that might work. I attend the auction, she said, as merchandise. The room exploded. Absolutely not, Vale started. Are you insane? Eleanor added. But Elena pressed on. Victor knows every aristocrat in London. He'll spot fake buyers immediately, but he won't question his own inventory, especially if one of the women looks exactly like the bride who humiliated him. You want to let him capture you, Vale said flatly. I want to give him the illusion of capturing me, while actually having complete control. Elena's mind was racing now, the plan forming. You said women disappear from the streets, so I disappear. Victor's men find me, bring me to the auction, and while I'm there, I document everything, names, faces, crimes, become the witness whose testimony can't be dismissed. And when Victor realizes who you are, Thomas asked quietly, then I run, or fight, or both. Elena looked at Vale. You taught me how to survive. Trust that I learned. Vale's expression was anguished. This is exactly what I didn't do for Catherine. I let her walk into danger thinking I could save her in time. And I failed. You're not going to fail. Elena crossed to him, took his scarred face in her hands. Because this time we're doing it together. Not as rescuer and victim, as partners. For a long moment, Vale just looked at her. Then he covered her hands with his own. If anything happens to you, it won't, because you'll be there. Elena managed to smile. Besides, someone needs to teach Victor that women aren't property to be traded. Might as well be the bride who got away. Eleanor was watching them with an unreadable expression. You two are either brilliantly brave or monumentally stupid. I haven't decided which. Can it be both? Elena asked. That surprised a laugh out of Eleanor. I like you. Which is unfortunate because I don't want to like someone who's about to do something this reckless. She turned to her husband. Thomas? Lord Thorne had been quiet, thinking. Now he nodded slowly. It could work, if we plan it perfectly, control every variable. We have 3 days, Eleanor said. 3 days to make this convincing enough that Victor takes the bait, while having enough safeguards that Elena survives if things go wrong. They worked through the night, building the plan layer by layer. Margaret was brought in, the former servant turned driver turned key witness. She knew Victor's operation intimately and could help Elena prepare for what to expect. He keeps the women in a warehouse near the docks, Margaret explained, her voice tight with remembered trauma. Guards them like treasure until the auction. The buyers arrive masked to protect their identities. Victor presents each woman like she's an object, describes her qualities, takes bids. Elena forced herself not to react to the horror of it. How many women at each auction? 5 to 10, depends on supply. Margaret's hands clenched. Some he's bought from desperate families, others he's taken from the streets. A few are there willingly, girls so broken they don't know how to leave. How do I get Victor to take me? Be in the wrong place at the wrong time. His men patrol certain neighborhoods looking for targets. Young, pretty, alone. You'd fit the profile perfectly. Margaret paused. But once they have you, there's no backing out. You'll be locked up with the others until the auction. No rescue possible without exposing the whole operation. Which is why we don't rescue her until the auction itself, Eleanor said. When all the buyers are present. When we can document the entire network. Vale hadn't spoken in an hour. He stood by the window staring out at London's dark streets, every line of his body rigid with tension. Elena went to him. Say something. I'm trying to find an alternative. Any alternative. His voice was rough. Something that doesn't involve you walking into hell and hoping we can pull you out in time. There isn't one. You know there isn't. Vale turned to face her. In the lamplight, his scar seemed deeper, more pronounced. Catherine was brave too. She trusted me to save her, and I let her down. Then don't let me down. Elena took his hands. I'm not Catherine. I'm not walking into this blind and hoping for rescue. I know the risks. I'm choosing them anyway. Why? The word came out ragged. Why risk everything for people you don't even know? Elena thought about the girl who'd barely escaped Victor's operation, about all the women still trapped in it, about the life she'd almost been forced into, a different kind of cage, but a cage nonetheless. Because someone has to, she said simply, and I'm tired of waiting for heroes. So I'll become one instead. Vale studied her face like he was memorizing it. Then slowly he pulled her into his arms. The embrace was fierce, protective, and achingly brief. 3 days, he said against her hair. We have 3 days to prepare you for this. I'm going to teach you everything I know about surviving enemy territory. Promise me something, Elena whispered. Anything. If this goes wrong, if Victor wins, don't blame yourself. Don't spend another 5 years drowning in guilt. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Promise me you'll keep fighting. Destroy him anyway. Make it mean something. Vale's hands tightened on her shoulders. I promise, but it's not going to come to that, because I will burn London to ash before I let him keep you. The vow hung between them, absolute and terrifying in its sincerity. The next 3 days were a blur of brutal preparation. Vale taught Elena how to hide weapons in impossible places, how to pick locks with a hairpin, how to read a room for exits and threats, how to stay calm when every instinct screamed to panic. Pain is information, he said during one particularly vicious training session. It tells you what's damaged, but it doesn't have to control you. Push through it. Stay focused. Margaret taught her the auction's logistics, how Victor's operation worked, what to expect from guards and buyers, how to identify which men were just there for the show and which ones were genuinely dangerous. Mr. Halstead will recognize you immediately, Margaret warned. That's when things get unpredictable. He might try to buy you himself, or he might do something worse. Worse how? Margaret's expression went dark. Victor doesn't like being defied. When Catherine tried to leave him, he made an example of her, hurt her in ways that wouldn't show in public, made her understand that running only made things worse. She met Elena's eyes. If he gets you alone before the raid happens, I don't know if we can stop what he'll do. Eleanor coordinated with her network of reformist magistrates. By the second day, she'd secured commitments from enough officials to raid the auction, provided they had solid evidence of crimes in progress. We get one shot at this, she said. If we move too early, Victor will scatter and rebuild elsewhere. Too late, and the buyers will have already completed their transactions and vanished. So the timing has to be perfect, Elena said. Exactly. which means you need to survive in that warehouse long enough for us to get everyone in position, roughly 12 hours from when Victor's men take you until the auction starts. 12 hours trapped with other terrified women, guarded by men who saw them as merchandise. 12 hours of Victor potentially discovering who she was and deciding to settle scores before the auction ever began. Elena tried not to think about everything that could go wrong. On the third morning, Margaret's contact delivered the critical information. The auction was set for that very night. Location? A warehouse near Shadwell Docks. Time? Midnight. Which meant Elena needed to be captured within the next few hours. They gathered in Eleanor's study for final preparations. Elena wore a simple dress, the kind a servant or shopgirl might own. No jewelry, no identifying marks. Her hair was styled differently, pulled back in a practical braid. To casual observers, she'd be just another young woman from London's working class. But hidden in the dress's hem was a tiny knife. In her boot, a lockpick. And memorized in her mind, every detail of the plan. Vale looked like he'd aged years in 3 days. He'd barely slept, spending every night pacing Eleanor's halls or reviewing strategies until dawn. "Last chance to back out," he said. Elena shook her head. "We're ending this. Tonight." Eleanor handed her a small vial. "Laudanum. If things get unbearable, take a tiny sip, just enough to dull the worst of it, but stay alert. You'll need your wits." "The magistrates will be positioned around the warehouse by 11, Thomas added. "The moment we have sufficient evidence, they'll move in." "And if something goes wrong?" Elena asked. Vale's expression went hard. "Then I'm coming in alone, and everyone between me and you dies." It should have sounded like bravado. Instead, it sounded like a promise written in blood. Margaret would accompany Elena to the target neighborhood, Whitechapel, where Victor's men were known to hunt. They'd stage a separation, make Elena look vulnerable and alone. The rest would be up to Victor's spotters. As they prepared to leave, Vale caught Elena's arm. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when Victor is destroyed and you're safe, we need to talk." "About what?" His thumb brushed across her knuckles, the gesture achingly gentle. "About the fact that somewhere in the last week, this stopped being just strategy for me." Elena's breath caught. Before she could respond, Eleanor cleared her throat. "Save the romantic declarations for after we've committed several felonies and destroyed a trafficking ring," she said dryly. "Margaret's waiting." The carriage ride to Whitechapel was silent. Margaret kept checking the streets, making sure they weren't followed. Elena rehearsed her cover story, a maid whose employer had just dismissed her, looking for work, desperate enough to take risks. They stopped 2 blocks from the target area. Margaret squeezed Elena's hand. "You're braver than anyone I've ever met," she said. "Don't let them break that." Then Elena stepped out into the London twilight alone. Whitechapel after dark was a different world. Narrow alleys choked with fog, desperate people huddled in doorways. The smell of the Thames mixing with coal smoke and human misery. Elena walked slowly, trying to look lost and vulnerable. It didn't take long. She felt eyes on her before she saw anyone, felt the weight of predatory attention. Then footsteps behind her, matching her pace. "Lost, sweetheart?" Elena turned. 2 men, rough clothes, cold eyes, Victor's hunters. "I'm looking for the Granger household," she said, voice small and frightened. "I was told they might need a housemaid. Granger's moved last month." The taller one smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "But we might know some folks who need help. Pay well. Room and board included." Every instinct screamed at Elena to run, but she forced herself to look hopeful instead. "Really? That would be wonderful. I've been searching all day." The shorter man moved behind her, cutting off escape. "Why don't you come with us? We'll take you right there." Elena let them guide her toward a waiting cart. Let them think she was just another desperate girl who'd fallen into their trap. As they helped her climb into the back, where 2 other frightened women already huddled, Elena caught a glimpse of a figure in the shadows. Vale, following at a distance, making sure she wasn't alone. Then the cart jerked forward, and Whitechapel's nightmare streets swallowed her whole. The warehouse was exactly as Margaret described, a rotting structure near the docks that stank of salt and decay. Guards dragged Elena and the other women inside, downstairs into a basement divided into cells. 8 women were already there, Young, terrified, some crying. Others had the hollow look of people who'd already given up. A guard shoved Elena into a cell with 3 others. The door clanged shut. In the dim light, Elena could see the fear in her cellmate's eyes. "First time?" one of them whispered. She couldn't have been more than 16. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. "It gets worse," the girl said. "The auction is tonight. After that—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Elena settled against the wall, feeling the knife hidden in her hem, the lockpick in her boot. Outside, she could hear guards joking, laughing, treating human suffering like a business transaction. Somewhere above them, Victor Halstead was preparing for his auction, polishing his merchandise, getting ready to sell women like they were cattle. But what Victor didn't know was that one of his prizes was actually a weapon, and in less than 12 hours, his entire operation would burn. Elena just had to survive until then. The hours crawled past. Women whispered or cried or sat in numb silence. Guards brought stale bread and water. One of them lingered too long at Elena's cell, eyes crawling over her. "Fresh one," he muttered. "Pretty. Might fetch a high price." Elena kept her eyes down, playing the part of a terrified victim. But inside she was counting, memorizing faces, documenting every crime. Then, around 10 o'clock, the atmosphere changed. Guards started barking orders. Women were pulled from cells, cleaned up, made presentable. The auction was approaching. Elena was hauled out with the others, forced into a washroom where rough hands scrubbed away dirt and combed out hair. She caught glimpses of other women, some young enough to be children, others old enough to be mothers, all equally terrified. They were lined up in a backstage area. Elena could hear voices beyond a curtain, wealthy men arriving, taking seats, discussing the merchandise they'd come to purchase like they were at a horse auction. And then a voice she recognized made her blood freeze. "Gentlemen, welcome." Victor Halstead. He was here, running the auction himself. The curtain parted. Victor stepped through, impeccably dressed, every inch the civilized aristocrat. His eyes swept over the lineup of women and stopped dead when they reached Elena. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Victor's lips curved into a smile that promised infinite cruelty. "Well," he said softly, "this is unexpected." Elena's hand moved toward the knife in her hem, but guards grabbed her arms before she could reach it, slamming her against the wall hard enough to rattle her teeth. Victor walked slowly toward her, taking his time, savoring the moment. "Did you really think," he asked conversationally, "that I wouldn't have people watching Ravenshade? That I wouldn't know the moment you left Vale's protection?" He leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "I've been waiting for you, Elena, waiting for you to make exactly this mistake." Elena's mind raced. The plan was ruined. Vale and Eleanor were outside, waiting for the auction to start, not knowing Victor had already caught her. The magistrates wouldn't move until they had evidence of transactions, which meant they wouldn't raid until it was too late. She was on her own. Victor straightened, addressing the guards. "Take her to my private room. Not the auction. This one is mine." "Sir, the buyers are expecting to—" "I said she's mine." Victor's voice cracked like a whip. "The rest can have the others. This one is personal." They dragged Elena toward a door at the back of the warehouse. She fought, screaming, trying to break free. But there were too many of them, and they'd taken her weapons during the washing. The door slammed shut behind her. Victor stood there, adjusting his cuffs, looking at her like a cat with a captured mouse. "Now then," he said pleasantly, "let's discuss what happens to brides who run away." The room Victor dragged Elena into was designed for one purpose: to break people who thought they had choices. Chains hung from the ceiling. A table held implements that made Elena's stomach turn. The walls were thick enough to muffle screams. Victor locked the door behind them with a sound like a coffin closing. "Do you know how much embarrassment you've caused me?" His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. That made it worse. "My bride fleeing on our wedding day, throwing herself at a scarred recluse, humiliating me in front of all London society." Elena backed away until she hit the wall. Her weapons were gone, taken during the washing, but Vale had taught her that the body itself was a weapon if you knew how to use it. "The plan was to marry you properly," Victor continued, circling her like a shark. "Break you slowly, the way I broke Catherine. Turn you into an obedient wife who understood her place." He smiled. But you've ruined that option. So now we do this the hard way. The magistrates know about this place, Elena said, fighting to keep her voice steady. They're coming. The magistrates I own? Victor laughed. My dear, I've been running this operation for 7 years. Do you really think I'd let it continue without protection? He pulled a knife from the table, not for killing, Elena realized with horror, but for something slower. No one is coming to save you, Elena. Your precious Duke is outside with the other buyers, waiting for an auction that will never feature you. By the time he realizes you're missing, you'll be long gone. Where? Does it matter? Somewhere far from London, somewhere no one will ever find you. Victor tested the knife's edge against his thumb. I have associates who specialize in training difficult women. They'll spend months teaching you obedience. And when they're done, when there's nothing left of the girl who dared defy me, I'll bring you back. Marry you properly. Let London see what happens to brides who run. Elena's mind raced through everything Vale had taught her. Pain is information. Stay focused. Survive until you can strike back. Catherine didn't fall, did she? Elena asked. You pushed her. Victor's smile widened. Catherine jumped. Because I made her understand that jumping was better than staying. That's the art of it, Elena. Making them choose their own destruction. He moved closer. Elena tensed, calculating distances and angles. She had one chance. Maybe. You're going to scream, Victor said pleasantly. Everyone does, eventually. The only question is how long you'll try to be brave first. The knife came up. Elena moved. She grabbed his wrist with both hands, using his momentum against him the way Vale had shown her, twisted hard. Victor's grip loosened and the knife clattered to the floor. Elena drove her knee into his stomach, then her elbow into his face as he doubled over. Victor went down, blood streaming from his broken nose. Elena ran for the door, but it was locked from outside. She spun back as Victor staggered to his feet, rage transforming his face into something inhuman. You're going to regret that, he snarled. He rushed her. Elena dodged, but the room was too small. Victor caught her by the hair, yanking her back hard enough to make her vision blur. His fist connected with her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest. But pain is just information. Elena went limp in his grip, making him take her full weight. Then she drove her heel down on his instep with everything she had. Victor howled and released her. She scrambled for the fallen knife. Her fingers closed around the handle just as Victor grabbed her ankle, dragging her back. Elena flipped over and slashed blindly. The blade caught his forearm, opening a red line. Victor fell back, staring at the blood like he couldn't believe it was his. You cut me, he said, almost wonderingly. You actually cut me. Elena stood, knife in hand, breathing hard. Her ribs screamed where he'd hit her. Blood dripped from a split in her lip, but she was still standing. I'm done being afraid of you, she said. Victor's expression shifted from shock to cold calculation. You think that little knife makes you dangerous? I've broken women stronger than you. Then you've never met a woman like me. They circled each other. Elena knew she couldn't win a prolonged fight. Victor was bigger, stronger, trained in violence. But she didn't need to win. She just needed to survive long enough for the raid to happen. If it was still happening, if Vale and Eleanor hadn't already been arrested or killed, if this entire plan hadn't collapsed into nightmare. Victor feinted left, then lunged right. Elena barely dodged, the knife cutting empty air where her throat had been. She slashed back, but he was already moving, faster than she expected. His hand closed around her wrist, grinding the bones. The knife fell. Victor's other hand wrapped around her throat. I was going to make this slow, he hissed, squeezing. But maybe quick is better. Maybe I'll just strangle you here and tell everyone the Duke's whore attacked me. Self-defense, tragic, really. Elena couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. She clawed at his hands, but his grip was iron. This was it. She was going to die in a warehouse basement, just another woman Victor Halstead destroyed. Then she remembered the vial in her dress pocket, the laudanum Eleanor had given her. With the last of her strength, Elena stopped fighting his hands. Instead, she reached into her pocket, found the vial, smashed it against Victor's face. The glass shattered, laudanum and blood mixed, getting into his eyes, his mouth. Victor screamed and released her, stumbling back. Elena collapsed, gasping, her throat on fire, but she forced herself to move, crawling toward the door. Behind her, Victor was wiping frantically at his face, the laudanum already taking effect. His movements became uncoordinated, sluggish. "You," he slurred, "can't." Then his legs gave out and he crashed to the floor. Elena dragged herself upright, using the wall for support. Victor lay there, conscious but paralyzed by the drug, his eyes fixed on her with impotent rage. "You're right about one thing," Elena said, her voice ragged. "This is personal." She picked up the fallen knife and turned to the locked door. The lockpick in her boot had survived the washing. They'd checked her dress, but not her shoes. With shaking hands, Elena worked the lock the way Vale had taught her. It took 3 tries. Then the door swung open. The hallway beyond was empty. The guards had gone to manage the auction. Elena could hear Victor's voice from somewhere in the warehouse, realizing with a chill that it was a recording. He'd set up a system to run the auction without being physically present, which meant the real Victor had planned to spend the entire night in that room with her. Elena pushed the thought away and moved carefully through the warehouse. She needed to find the other women. Free them before the magistrates raided. Make sure they weren't caught in the crossfire. The cells were down another hallway. Elena slipped past 2 guards who were drunk and distracted, arguing about a card game. Found the keys hanging on a hook, carelessly unsecured. The women stared at her in shock when she opened the first cell. "Who are you?" the 16-year-old girl whispered. "Someone who's ending this." Elena handed her the keys. "Free the others. When you hear shouting upstairs, run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run." "But the guards will be busy." Elena hoped that was true. Hoped Vale and Eleanor were still out there, still waiting for the right moment to strike. She climbed the stairs toward the auction floor. Voices drifted down, wealthy men discussing human beings like they were livestock. Elena's hands clenched. Then she heard it, a voice that made her heart leap. "Unacceptable. We were promised 10 lots, not 9. Where is the 10th? Vale. He was here, in the auction, playing the part of an interested buyer while searching for her." Elena pushed through the door onto the auction floor, and chaos erupted. 30 men in expensive clothes and masks turned to stare. On the stage, one of the women from the cells stood trembling while an auctioneer, not Victor, a hired man, extolled her virtues. And in the 3rd row, partially hidden by a mask but unmistakable, sat Adrian Vale. Their eyes met across the warehouse. Elena saw the flash of relief, then fury, then cold calculation in his expression. "That's her," one of the guards shouted. "The one Mr. Halstead wanted." Vale stood in one fluid motion. "Gentlemen, I believe we've been deceived." The room went silent. "This isn't a legitimate auction," Vale continued, his voice carrying absolute authority. "It's a trafficking operation run by Victor Halstead, and every man in this room is now complicit in a felony." "Ridiculous," someone sputtered. "This is a private sale." "Of human beings," Vale interrupted, "which, in case you've forgotten, is illegal, even for aristocrats." The doors at the back of the warehouse crashed open. Magistrates poured in, led by Eleanor and a grim-faced official Elena recognized from the newspapers, Magistrate Carver, known for his reformist politics and incorruptibility. "No one moves," Carver announced. "You're all under arrest." Pandemonium. Men shouted, tried to flee. The magistrates blocked exits, grabbing anyone who ran. Elena stood frozen in the chaos until Vale reached her, pulling her against his chest. "Are you hurt?" His hands ran over her, checking for injuries. "Where is Victor?" "Locked in a room downstairs, unconscious." Elena's voice cracked. "He was going to—" "I know. I saw the room." Vale's jaw was rigid enough to shatter. "Stay with Eleanor. I need to make sure he doesn't escape." But before he could move, a commotion erupted from the basement stairs. Guards were dragging Victor up, barely conscious, blood on his face and shirt. Eleanor appeared at Elena's side, wrapping a cloak around her shoulders. "You brilliant, reckless girl. We thought we'd lost you." "How did you know when to raid?" "We didn't." Vale decided he couldn't wait any longer, paid an outrageous sum to get into the auction as a buyer, then used the position to signal Magistrate Carver the moment he realized you weren't in the main group. Eleanor's smile was fierce. "Between that and Margaret's testimony, We had enough to move. Across the warehouse, Magistrate Carver confronted Victor. Victor Halstead, you're under arrest for trafficking, kidnapping, assault, and murder. Murder? Victor slurred through the laudanum. You can't prove... We can, Eleanor said, stepping forward. She held up a folder, the same evidence she'd shown Elena days ago. 7 years of documentation, testimony from survivors, financial records showing bribes to corrupt officials. And as of tonight, 30 witnesses to your trafficking operation. She gestured to the arrested buyers. Every man here will testify against you to save themselves. Your protection is gone, Victor. Your empire is dust. Victor's eyes found Elena. You did this. She survived you, Vale interrupted, moving to stand beside Elena, which is more than you can say for Catherine, or any of the others you destroyed. Catherine was weak. Vale's fist connected with Victor's jaw before anyone could stop him. Victor went down hard, and this time he stayed down. 2 constables dragged him away. As they passed, Victor's eyes, glazed with drugs and hate, locked on Elena one final time. This isn't over, he mumbled. Yes, Elena said quietly. It is. The warehouse transformed into organized chaos. Magistrates documented evidence, took statements, cataloged crimes. The women from the cells were brought up carefully, wrapped in blankets, given water. Medical staff arrived to treat injuries. Elena gave her statement to Magistrate Carver, who listened with increasing horror. Miss Whitmore, what you did tonight was incredibly brave and monumentally illegal, he said when she finished. You deliberately put yourself in danger, infiltrated a criminal operation, and assaulted a peer of the realm. Elena lifted her chin. Are you arresting me? I should. Any reasonable magistrate would, Carver sighed. But I've spent 20 years watching men like Victor Halstead operate with impunity, watching them destroy lives while hiding behind wealth and titles. And tonight you ended it. He closed his notebook. So no, I'm not arresting you. I'm thanking you. By dawn, it was over. Victor was in a cell. The buyers were being processed. The women were taken to a shelter Eleanor's network operated, and Elena stood in the warehouse doorway, watching the sun rise over London's docks. Vale joined her, offering a coat against the morning chill. You were supposed to wait for rescue, he said. I got impatient. You could have died. But I didn't. Elena turned to face him. We won, Adrian. We actually won. Vale's expression was complicated. Relief, pride, residual fear. You terrified me. When I realized Victor had taken you to that room, when I thought I was too late again. Elena kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't strategic, just a spontaneous expression of everything she couldn't put into words. Gratitude, partnership, and something deeper that had been growing since the moment he pulled her into his carriage. Vale froze for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, holding her like she was something precious and breakable. The kiss deepened, fierce and desperate, 2 survivors claiming a moment of light in the darkness. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was breathless. I should have asked permission, she managed. Don't you dare apologize. Vale's scarred face held an expression she'd never seen before, something like hope. Elena Whitmore, you are the most magnificent disaster I've ever encountered. Is that a compliment? It's a proposal. Elena's breath caught. What? Vale took her hands, his grip warm and steady. We told London you were my Duchess. Let's make it true. Not because we need a scandal or a strategy, but because somewhere in the last week I fell completely in love with a woman who fights like a warrior and refuses to be conquered. Adrian, you don't have to answer now. I know this is sudden, insane even. But when I thought I'd lost you tonight, when I thought Victor might win, his voice cracked. I realized the worst tragedy wouldn't be failing to stop him. It would be never telling you how I feel. Elena looked at this scarred, damaged man who'd taught her to fight, who'd given her partnership instead of ownership, who'd walked into hell tonight because he couldn't bear to lose her. Yes, she said. Vale blinked. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Actually marry you, not just pretend for London's benefit. Elena smiled through sudden tears. I was sold once. This time, I choose. The kiss they shared tasted like smoke and victory, and futures that neither of them had dared imagine a week ago. Eleanor found them minutes later, looking far too pleased with herself. The magistrate wants to discuss next steps, she said. Apparently Victor's arrest has exposed a network of corrupt officials. They'll need testimony. Later, Vale said, not releasing Elena. Right now, I'm making sure my Duchess gets medical attention and about 16 hours of sleep. Your actual Duchess, I take it? Eleanor's smile was knowing. About time you two stopped pretending this was purely strategic. Elena leaned into Vale's warmth, exhausted but alive. What happens now? With Victor. Trial. Almost certainly conviction. Men like Victor don't survive exposure. Eleanor's expression hardened. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison, which is more mercy than he deserves. But it's better than death. Death would be too quick. And the women we saved? Already being cared for. Margaret's coordinating with our network. They'll have shelter, medical care, and help rebuilding their lives. Eleanor's gaze softened. You gave them that, Elena. You and your ridiculous plan. The weight of it settled over Elena, the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. 7 years of Victor's operation destroyed in a single night. 30 wealthy men exposed and arrested. Countless future victims saved because one runaway bride decided to fight back. The carriage ride back to Eleanor's townhouse passed in a blur. Elena dozed against Vale's shoulder, his arms secure around her. Every muscle ached. Her ribs were likely cracked from Victor's punch. Her throat bore the bruises of his hands. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd won. At the townhouse, Mrs. Henshaw fussed over Elena like a worried hen, immediately ordering hot baths and medical supplies. The doctor confirmed cracked ribs, bruised larynx, various contusions, but nothing permanently damaged. You're remarkably lucky, he said, wrapping her ribs. Another few seconds in that room and— But there weren't another few seconds, Elena interrupted. I got out. After the doctor left, Elena soaked in a hot bath until the water turned cold. Her reflection in the mirror showed a stranger, a woman with bruises painting her throat, exhaustion shadowing her eyes, but also something new, something that looked like strength. A knock at the door. Vale's voice. May I come in? Elena wrapped herself in a robe. Yes. He entered, carrying tea and looking like he hadn't slept in days. Probably because he hadn't. I should let you rest, he said, setting down the tray. But I needed to see you. Make sure you were real. I'm real. Elena touched his hand. We both are. We survived. Vale pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injuries. They stood there in the quiet of Eleanor's guest room, just breathing together. I was 17 when I went to war, Vale said suddenly. Thought I understood violence. Thought I'd seen the worst humanity could offer. His arms tightened fractionally. Then I watched good men die for politics, watched villages burn, killed people whose names I never learned. And when I came back, I was convinced I'd become a monster. You're not a monster. I know that now, because a woman who just escaped a nightmare chose to stand beside me instead of running away. He pulled back to look at her. You saved me, Elena. Not just from Victor, from myself. We saved each other. The truth of it hung between them. Two broken people who'd somehow become whole by refusing to give up. The wedding, Vale said, when you're healed, when this is all settled, I want to do it properly. Not a scandal or a strategy, a real wedding with family and vows that mean something. Elena smiled. I get to wear a dress I actually choose this time? You can wear armor if you want, as long as you're there. I'll be there, she kissed him softly. But right now, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Sleep. You look like you're about to collapse. Vale started to protest, but exhaustion won. He helped Elena into bed, then, at her insistence, lay down beside her, fully clothed, just to be close. Within minutes, they were both asleep, tangled together like survivors of a shipwreck holding on to each other in the aftermath. Outside, London was waking up to the scandal of the century. News of Victor Halstead's arrest was spreading through the city like wildfire. The aristocrat who'd seemed untouchable, brought down by a runaway bride and a reclusive duke. By evening, the newspapers were calling Elena the Duchess of Retribution. Artists were already sketching her likeness. Ballads were being composed about the woman who'd infiltrated a trafficking ring to save others. Elena slept through all of it, healing in the arms of the man who'd taught her to fight. When she finally woke, it was to find Eleanor sitting by the bed, reading a newspaper with obvious amusement. "You're famous," Eleanor announced. "London society is absolutely rabid with gossip. Half of them are calling you a hero. The other half are scandalized that a woman would do something so improper." "What are they saying about Adrian? That he's either the luckiest or bravest man in England to marry you?" Eleanor set down the paper. "The magistrate sent word. Victor's trial is scheduled for next week. They want you to testify." Elena's stomach tightened. "I have to see him again?" "Only if you want to. Your written statement might be sufficient, but—" Eleanor's expression turned serious. "If you testify in person, if you face him in that courtroom, it sends a message to Victor, to every man like him, that women aren't property to be broken." Elena thought about Catherine, who'd jumped from a window because she saw no other escape, about the women in those cells who'd been stolen and sold, about every victim who'd never gotten the chance to face their abuser. "I'll testify," she said. "I thought you might." Eleanor smiled. "The Duchess of Ravenshade doesn't do anything halfway." The week before the trial passed in a strange limbo. Victor remained in custody, but his lawyers filed endless motions, trying to delay or dismiss the charges. His allies in Parliament made noise about irregularities in his arrest. A few corrupt magistrates tried to interfere. But Magistrate Carver held firm. And with each day, more evidence emerged. More victims came forward. The full scope of Victor's operation became impossible to deny. Elena gave interview after interview to investigators, detailing everything she'd witnessed. Margaret testified. The other women testified. Even some of the arrested buyers, desperate for leniency, turned on Victor. The case became a fortress of evidence that not even Victor's wealth could dismantle. Vale stayed close throughout, a steady presence. They didn't talk much about the future. There'd be time for that after the trial. For now, it was enough to survive each day, to heal, to prepare for the final confrontation. On the morning of this trial, Elena dressed in dark blue, a color that suggested both mourning and strength. Vale escorted her to the courthouse, where crowds had gathered. Some cheered for her. Others shouted insults, calling her a troublemaker and a whore. Elena ignored them all. Inside the courtroom, Victor sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller somehow. Prison had stripped away his veneer of civility. He looked like what he was, a predator caught and caged. When Elena took the witness stand, their eyes met. Victor's held nothing but hate. But Elena wasn't afraid anymore. She testified for 3 hours, described everything: the escape, the deception, the auction, the room where he'd tried to break her. Her voice never wavered. Her facts never faltered. The jury listened in horrified silence. When the prosecution finished, Victor's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggested she'd wanted to be captured, that she'd orchestrated everything for attention. "Is it true," the lawyer asked, "that you willingly entered that warehouse?" "Yes." "And that you knew the risks?" "Yes." "So you participated in this alleged criminal operation of your own free will?" Elena met Victor's eyes as she answered. "I participated in stopping a monster who'd been destroying women for 7 years. If that makes me guilty of something, then I'm proud to be guilty." The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge had to call for order. Victor's lawyer had no more questions. The trial lasted 3 days, testimony from dozens of witnesses, evidence that filled tables. By the end, even Victor's own lawyers looked sick. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty, on all counts. Victor Halstead was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. No possibility of parole. His estates were seized to compensate his victims. His name was struck from the peerage. As guards led him away, Victor looked back at Elena one final time. "You destroyed my life," he said. Elena stood, flanked by Vale and Eleanor. "No, I ended your reign of terror." There's a difference. Victor disappeared into custody, and with him went the last shadow hanging over Elena's freedom. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had tripled, but this time they were all cheering. Elena stood on the steps, exhausted but victorious, and raised her hand in acknowledgement. The runaway bride had become the Duchess of Ravenshade. The woman who'd refused to be sold had brought down an empire of cruelty. And as Vale took her hand, leading her toward their carriage and their future, Elena Whitmore finally understood what freedom tasted like. It tasted like victory. The carriage rolled through London streets, while crowds cheered and threw flowers. Elena sat beside Vale, her hand clasped in his, watching the city transform before her eyes. Where once she'd been a commodity to be traded, now she was something else entirely. A symbol. "They're calling you the People's Duchess," Vale said, gesturing to a street vendor hawking broadsheets with Elena's likeness. "There's already a play being written about you, and 3 separate publishers want your story." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, suddenly exhausted despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "I just wanted to survive. I didn't mean to become this." "You became exactly what London needed." Vale pressed a kiss to her temple. A woman who refused to accept the world's cruelty as inevitable. But Elena knew the victory was incomplete. Victor was imprisoned, his operation destroyed, but the system that had enabled him remained intact. The laws that treated women as property, the social structures that valued reputation over justice, the aristocratic networks that protected predators. One monster was caged, but how many others still prowled free? Eleanor was waiting at the townhouse with news that made Elena's triumph feel suddenly fragile. "The House of Lords is in an uproar," she announced, leading them into the study. "Victor's allies are claiming the trial was a farce, that you orchestrated everything to destroy a nobleman's reputation. They're calling for investigations into judicial misconduct." "They can't overturn the verdict," Vale said. "The evidence was overwhelming." "They don't need to overturn it. They just need to discredit it enough that society starts questioning whether Victor was truly guilty or simply the victim of an ambitious woman and a vengeful duke." Eleanor spread newspapers across the desk. "Look at these." The headlines were brutal. "Duchess of Scandal. Did Whitmore seduce her way to power?" "Vale's Revenge. Using an innocent girl to destroy a rival." "The Halstead Affair. Aristocratic persecution or justice?" Elena felt sick. "They're making me the villain." "They're afraid," Thomas Thorne said, entering with more documents. Victor's conviction exposed how many powerful men were complicit in his operation. The arrested buyers included members of parliament, judges, military officers. Their allies are desperate to rewrite the narrative before more dominoes fall. "So what do we do?" Elena asked. Eleanor's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We give them something they can't rewrite. A spectacle so public, so undeniable, that even Victor's allies can't spin it." "What kind of spectacle?" "Your wedding," Eleanor gestured to Vale. "London expects scandal from the Duke of Ravenshade. Give them romance instead. A wedding so grand, so publicly celebrated, that it becomes impossible to claim you were coerced or manipulated. Show everyone that you chose this life, that you chose him." Vale frowned. "We discussed a small ceremony. Family only." That was before Victor's allies tried to resurrect his reputation from prison. Eleanor leaned forward. "Adrian, you've hidden from society for 5 years. Elena just brought down one of England's most powerful aristocrats. Together, you're either the greatest love story London has ever seen or the most dangerous conspiracy. We need to control which narrative wins." Elena thought about it. The part of her that had run from the church in a wedding dress wanted nothing to do with public spectacle. But the part that had testified in court, that had faced down Victor and survived, understood Eleanor's strategy. "The royal masquerade," Elena said suddenly. "You mentioned it was the social event of the season. When is it?" 3 weeks, Eleanor said. "But it's invitation only, and after the trial. After the trial, we're the most talked about couple in England. They'll want us there." Elena looked at Vale. "We attend the masquerade, make our first public appearance as an engaged couple, and then we announce our wedding date in front of all of London society." "You want to walk into a room full of people who either worship you or want to destroy you?" Vale asked. "I want to show them I'm not afraid anymore." Elena's voice was steady. Victor tried to break me in private. His allies are trying to discredit me in public. Let's face them all at once and end this. Vale studied her face, seeing the determination there. Then he turned to Eleanor. Can you secure invitations? Please. After tonight's verdict, every hostess in London will be desperate to have you attend their events. Eleanor was already writing notes. I'll contact Lady Ashford. The masquerade is being held at her estate. She'll agree. And if she doesn't? Eleanor's smile was predatory. Her son was one of the men arrested at Victor's auction. She'll agree. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Mrs. Henshaw orchestrated Elena's wardrobe with military precision. You'll need gowns that make you look like a duchess, not a scandal. Elegance, not excess. Strength, not submission. Margaret helped Elena practice navigating social situations even more treacherous than before. They'll try to provoke you, ask inappropriate questions, test whether you're truly Adrian's equal or just his pretty accessory. Don't take the bait. And Vale continued her education in survival, though now it was political rather than physical. The aristocracy operates on perception, he explained one evening in the library. Whoever controls the story controls reality. Victor's allies are trying to make you seem like a calculating seductress. We counter by showing them a woman of substance. How? By being exactly who you are, brilliant, fierce, and completely uninterested in their approval. Vale handed her a folder. These are the families who will be at the masquerade. Study them. Know their allegiances, their vulnerabilities, their secrets. Information is armor. Elena spent hours memorizing names and connections, building a mental map of London's power structure. She learned which families had daughters Victor had pursued, which men had business dealings that wouldn't survive scrutiny, which women secretly supported her but couldn't say so publicly. By the night of the masquerade, Elena knew more about London's elite than most of them knew about each other. The gown Mrs. Henshaw commissioned was a masterpiece, deep emerald silk that made Elena's eyes look like forests, with silver embroidery that caught candlelight like stars. The mask was simple but elegant, framing her face rather than hiding it. Vale dressed in black and silver, his mask doing nothing to hide the scar. He'd stopped trying to conceal it, Elena realized. Stopped treating it as something shameful. You look like a queen, he said when she descended the stairs. I look like someone pretending to be a queen. Same thing. Vale offered his arm. Queens are just women who refuse to kneel. Sound familiar? The carriage ride to Lady Ashford's estate was tense. Elena could feel Vale's concern radiating off him like heat. We can still leave London, he said quietly. Forget the masquerade. Get married at Ravenshade with just family. Let society gossip itself to death without us. And let Victor's allies win? Let them rewrite history so he becomes the victim? Elena shook her head. No, we finish this tonight. The estate blazed with light, music spilling from open windows. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging aristocrats in elaborate masks and costumes. Elena recognized faces she'd studied, allies and enemies, supporters and saboteurs. They entered together, and the ballroom went silent. It was the Ashford ball all over again, but magnified. Every eye in the room fixed on them. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Then Lady Ashford herself approached, a severe woman whose gratitude for Eleanor's discretion regarding her son outweighed her discomfort with scandal. Your Grace, Miss Whitmore, she curtsied slightly. Welcome. I must say London has spoken of little else but your adventures. I hope we've provided adequate entertainment, Elena said smoothly. Lady Ashford's lips twitched. Adequate is an understatement. Please, enjoy the evening. They moved into the crowd. Elena could feel the tension, the curiosity, the barely concealed hostility from some quarters, but she kept her head high, her hand steady on Vale's arm. The first challenge came from Lord Pemberton, a corpulent man who'd been one of Victor's closest allies. Miss Whitmore, he said, blocking their path. Or should I say, the infamous Duchess of Scandal. Tell me, how does it feel to destroy a man's life with lies and manipulation? The room held its breath. Elena smiled. I wouldn't know, Lord Pemberton. Perhaps you should ask the 30 men who were arrested at Victor's auction. Oh, wait, Your nephew was one of them, wasn't he? How is Edmund enjoying prison? Pemberton's face went purple. You insolent— Careful, Vale said quietly. You're addressing my future wife, and I'm considerably less forgiving than she is. Pemberton sputtered and retreated. Around them, Elena felt the room's atmosphere shift. She'd just demonstrated she wouldn't be intimidated, that she knew their secrets and wasn't afraid to use them. More challenges came throughout the evening. Lady Melbourne, still sharp-tongued but now openly curious rather than hostile. Lord Ashford's eldest son, trying to determine if Elena was a genuine reformer or an opportunist. A cluster of young women who saw her as either inspiration or threat. Elena handled each encounter with the skills she'd learned, deflecting insults, making alliances, showing just enough steel to keep predators at bay while maintaining the grace expected of a duchess. But the true test came when the music started and Vale led her to the dance floor. The waltz they'd practiced 1,000 times at Ravenshade. The dance that had started as strategy and become something else entirely. As they moved together, the room watching their every step, Elena felt the weight of everything they'd survived. The escape, the partnership, the war against Victor, the trial. And now this, a public declaration that they'd not only survived, but triumphed. You're thinking too much, Vale murmured. I can see it in your eyes. I'm thinking about how far we've come, from a desperate woman in a ruined wedding dress to this. This being a woman who brought down an empire of cruelty and is now dancing at London's most exclusive event? Vale's scarred mouth curved. I'd say that's quite an upgrade. What about you? From a reclusive duke to someone society can't stop talking about. I prefer being talked about with you than being forgotten alone. His hand tightened at her waist. Elena, whatever happens tonight, whatever London decides about us, I want you to know that you saved me. Not from Victor, from becoming like him, from letting rage and grief turn me into something monstrous. Elena's throat tightened. You were never monstrous. I was close. And you pulled me back. The music swelled. They turned together, and Elena saw faces in the crowd, some hostile, some admiring, most simply fascinated. But she also saw Eleanor, watching with satisfaction. Margaret, who'd survived Victor's household and now worked to help other survivors. The women from the warehouse, some of whom had been invited tonight as Eleanor's guests, watching their former captive dance like royalty. The song ended. The room erupted in applause. And then Eleanor appeared at the edge of the dance floor, looking pleased and dangerous. It's time, she said. Vale nodded. He led Elena to the raised platform where the orchestra sat, helped her up the steps. The room quieted immediately, sensing something significant was about to happen. Vale's voice carried across the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your hospitality tonight. Lady Ashford has been most gracious in hosting us. Polite applause, curious faces. Many of you know the story of how Miss Whitmore and I met. Some of you believe versions of that story that are inaccurate. Vale's tone was mild, but his eyes were hard. So let me clarify. Elena Whitmore was being forced into a marriage with Victor Halstead, a man we now know to be a predator and a criminal. She escaped. I offered protection. And in the process of destroying Halstead's operation, we discovered something neither of us expected. He turned to Elena, taking her hand. We fell in love. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. So tonight, Vale continued, I'm asking Elena Whitmore, in front of all of London society, to do me the honor of becoming my wife. Not for scandal, not for strategy, but because I cannot imagine facing the future without her. Every eye turned to Elena. This was it. The moment that would define how London remembered this entire saga. Was she a victim who'd been rescued? A schemer who'd manipulated her way to power? Or something else entirely? Elena stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. When I ran from my wedding to Victor Halstead, I wasn't running toward anything. I was just trying to survive. She looked at the crowd, seeing faces she recognized from the trial, from society events, from the broadsheets that had both praised and vilified her. But Adrian Vale taught me that survival isn't enough, that sometimes you have to fight, not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't fight back. She turned to Vale. He didn't rescue me. We rescued each other, and yes, I will marry him. Not because society expects it or because it's convenient, but because he's the only man who's ever treated me like a partner instead of property. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. But not everyone was clapping. Elena could see Pemberton and his allies standing rigid, furious. Could see the calculation in some eyes, the skepticism in others. Then someone unexpected stepped forward. Lady Melbourne. I think, she said, her voice cutting through the noise, that we've all been witness to the most remarkable love story of our generation. A woman who refused to accept cruelty as her fate. A man who came out of isolation to fight beside her. Together, they've changed London. She raised her glass. To the Duke and Duchess of Ravenshade, may their marriage be as fierce as their courtship. The room exploded in cheers. Even Pemberton's allies couldn't withstand the tide. Within moments, the entire ballroom was toasting them. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Not from relief or gratitude, but from the sudden realization that she'd won. Completely. Undeniably. The narrative was theirs now. Unassailable. Vale pulled her close, whispering in her ear. Still think this was a good idea? Ask me again in 20 years. Deal. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and champagne. Eleanor orchestrated everything perfectly, making sure Elena spoke to every important family, solidified every alliance, demonstrated her worthiness to be a duchess. By midnight, Elena was exhausted but triumphant. They made their excuses to Lady Ashford and slipped away into the night. In the carriage, Elena finally let herself relax. The mask came off. The Duchess facade dropped. She was just herself again, a woman who'd survived impossible odds and somehow come out stronger. We should discuss the actual wedding, Vale said. Properly this time. What do you want? Elena thought about it. Not London. Too many people watching. Not Ravenshade. That's yours. Not ours yet. Somewhere new. Somewhere we can start fresh. I have an estate in the Cotswolds. Haven't visited in years, but it's beautiful. Rolling hills, stone churches, peace. Vale's expression softened. We could marry there. Small ceremony. Just family. And the people who actually matter. No scandal. No strategy. Just us. Just us. The wedding was planned for 6 weeks later, giving them time to prepare and let London's excitement cool into acceptance. Elena worked with Eleanor to establish a foundation for survivors of trafficking, using Victor's seized assets to fund shelters and legal support. The work was exhausting but meaningful, transforming her own survival into something that could help others. Margaret became the foundation's first director, her knowledge of Victor's operation invaluable in identifying and helping other victims. The women from the warehouse became some of its first residents, learning trades and building new lives far from the men who'd hurt them. Elena visited the foundation weekly, listening to stories that made her heart break and her resolve strengthen. These women had survived nightmares similar to hers, and now they were fighting back one day at a time. Vale supported her completely, using his influence to pressure Parliament into reforming marriage and property laws. It was slow work. Centuries of tradition didn't change overnight, but small victories accumulated. Bills were introduced. Debates were held. Change became possible. One afternoon, 3 weeks before the wedding, Elena received an unexpected visitor at Eleanor's townhouse. Her father. Thomas Whitmore looked older, diminished. The man who'd sold her to Victor now stood in Eleanor's drawing room like a beggar seeking alms. Elena, he said, I came to apologize. Elena studied him coldly. For gambling away our estate? For treating me like livestock? For handing me to a monster because it was easier than facing your debts? For all of it. Thomas's voice cracked. I was a coward. I convinced myself I was protecting you, that Victor would provide security. But I knew. I knew what kind of man he was. And I gave you to him anyway. Why are you here? Because you're getting married. And I wanted you to know that despite everything, I'm proud of you, of what you've become. You're stronger than I ever was. Elena felt nothing for this man. No anger, no forgiveness, just a vast emptiness where familial love should have been. I don't need your pride, she said quietly. And I don't need you at my wedding. We're not family anymore. You made that choice when you sold me." Thomas flinched like she'd struck him. "I understand. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Your apology doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the fear or the nightmares. It doesn't bring back the girl I was before you betrayed me." Elena stood. "You can leave now." As the door closed behind her father, Elena felt something shift inside her. A weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying suddenly lifted. She didn't need his approval or his regret. She'd built a new life, a new family, from the ashes of the one he'd destroyed. Vale found her an hour later, staring out the window at London's streets. "Eleanor told me about your father," he said. "Are you all right?" "I'm better than all right. I'm free." Elena turned to face him. "For so long I defined myself by what was done to me. The bride who was sold, the girl who ran, the woman who survived. But I'm more than my trauma." "What are you then?" Elena smiled. "I'm the Duchess of Ravenshade, the woman who brought down Victor Halstead, the partner of Adrian Vale. And in 6 weeks, I'm going to marry the man I love and build a life that's entirely my own choosing." Vale pulled her into his arms. "That sounds perfect." The wedding day arrived wrapped in golden September light. The Cotswold estate was everything Vale had promised. A small stone church surrounded by rolling hills with wildflowers blooming in meadows that stretched to the horizon. Elena wore a dress nothing like the one from her failed wedding to Victor. This one was simple ivory silk, elegant without ostentation, with lace the color of cream. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders. No veil, she'd never wear one again. Eleanor served as matron of honor, looking fiercely proud. Thomas Thorne stood as Vale's witness. Margaret attended with several women from the foundation, their presence a reminder of why Elena's freedom mattered. The ceremony was brief. No elaborate pageantry, just sincere vows exchanged in a church that had seen centuries of marriages. When the vicar asked if Elena took Adrian Vale as her husband, she didn't hesitate. "I do. I choose him. I choose this." And when Vale slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band of gold with a single emerald, Elena felt the last chains of her old life fall away completely. "You may kiss your bride," the vicar said. The kiss was soft and fierce and full of promise. Two survivors claiming their right to happiness after crawling through hell to reach it. The celebration afterward was small and joyful. No London aristocrats judging every movement, just people who genuinely cared, sharing food and wine and laughter in the estate's gardens. As sunset painted the hills gold and amber, Elena stood at the edge of the garden watching the horizon. Vale appeared beside her, offering champagne. "Regretting anything yet?" he asked. "Not even slightly." "Good, because there's no escape clause in those vows. You're stuck with me." Elena laughed. "I think I can manage." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. Then Elena spoke the thought that had been forming all day. "I want to write a book about everything that happened. Not to glorify it or sensationalize it, but to document it. So other women know they don't have to accept cruelty as inevitable." Vale considered this. "Victor's allies won't like it." "I don't particularly care what Victor's allies like." Elena's voice was firm. "They've already tried to destroy my reputation. Let them try again. This time I'll have the truth documented in my own words." "Then write it. I'll make sure it gets published, even if I have to buy a printing press myself." The book took Elena 2 years to complete. She wrote honestly about the fear, the violence, the moments she'd wanted to give up, but also about the strength she'd discovered, the allies who'd fought beside her, the women she'd helped save. When The Runaway Duchess, A True Account of Survival and Justice was published, it caused exactly the scandal Elena expected. Victor's remaining allies denounced it as fiction. Some aristocrats claimed it exaggerated the dangers women faced. Others called it inappropriate for a duchess to write so frankly about violence. But women bought it by the thousands, read it in secret, shared it with daughters, passed it between friends. Letters poured into Ravenshade Manor from women across England, thanking Elena for putting their unspoken fears into words. The book became a rallying cry for reform. Parliament, pressured by public opinion, finally passed laws protecting women's property rights and criminalizing forced marriages. It wasn't perfect, change never was, but it was progress. Victor died in prison 3 years after his conviction. Elena felt nothing when she heard the news. He'd already lost everything that mattered: his power, his reputation, his freedom. Death was just a technicality. By then, Elena and Vale had built a life that bore no resemblance to the chaos of their early days. They split time between Ravenshade Manor and the Cotswold estate, finding peace in each other's company. Vale emerged fully from his isolation, using his influence to support reformist causes. Elena's foundation expanded to serve women across England. They had arguments, fierce ones sometimes, but they were equals in their disagreements, neither trying to dominate the other. They had victories and setbacks, joys and sorrows, all the complicated texture of a real partnership. And on the 10th anniversary of the night Elena had jumped into Vale's carriage, they stood together in Ravenshade's portrait gallery, unveiling a painting Eleanor had commissioned. It showed them as they'd been that first night, Elena in her ruined wedding dress, defiant and desperate. Vale in his dark traveling clothes, scarred and dangerous. Between them, a fallen mask representing Victor. Behind them, a rising sun. "The runaway and the recluse," Eleanor said, reading the plaque. Or as I prefer to think of it, two stubborn people who saved each other. Elena studied the painting, seeing the woman she'd been. That terrified bride who'd thought survival was enough. She'd been so young, so afraid. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" Vale asked quietly. "Change any of it?" Elena considered the question seriously. The trauma had been real, the scars remained. There were still nights she woke from nightmares about Victor's hands around her throat. But she also thought about the women she'd helped save, the laws she'd helped change, the life she'd built with a man who'd proven that love and partnership could coexist. "No," she said finally. "I wouldn't change it, because if I'd never run from that church, I'd never have found this. Found you. Found myself." Vale pulled her close. The girl who ran became the woman who stood her ground, and the Duke who hid became the man who fought beside her. They stood there together, two survivors who'd refused to let cruelty define them, looking at the portrait of who they'd been and knowing how far they'd come. 15 years later, when Elena was 42 and Vale was 53, they stood in Parliament to witness the passage of the Survivors Protection Act, comprehensive legislation that criminalized trafficking, reformed marriage laws, and provided government funding for victim support. It was the culmination of years of advocacy and political maneuvering. As the vote was announced, passed by a substantial majority, Eleanor leaned over and whispered to Elena, "Catherine would be proud." "So would all of them," Elena replied, thinking of the women who hadn't survived, whose names she'd documented in her book. "This is for them, too." That night, back at Ravenshade, Vale found Elena in the library where they'd planned Victor's destruction so many years ago. "You did it," he said. "You changed England. We did it, together." Elena took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the warmth, just like everything else. They sat together by the fire, comfortable in the silence of a partnership that had weathered everything and emerged stronger. Outside, the grounds of Ravenshade stretched into darkness, no longer a refuge from the world, but a headquarters for changing it. Elena Whitmore, who'd started as a commodity to be traded, become a fugitive in a wedding dress, transformed into the Duchess of Ravenshade, and finally evolved into one of England's most influential reformers, had proven that refusing to accept cruelty as inevitable could reshape the world. She'd run from a church in terror and ended up changing a nation. And every woman who came after her would know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to kneel. Sometimes survival isn't enough. You have to fight back. And sometimes a runaway bride becomes exactly the kind of queen the world needs. The fire crackled. Vale's hand tightened around hers. And Elena Whitmore, the woman who'd chosen her own fate, smiled at the life she'd built from ashes and defiance. It had started with an escape. It became a revolution. And it proved that the most dangerous force in any kingdom is a woman who refuses to be conquered.